What most people don't tell you about smart glasses updates is that the real story isn't in the feature list. It's in the gap between what's promised and what actually shows up on your face. Because once you're past the hype, past the announcements, past the game-changing headlines, you're left with something very personal. How these glasses behave in your daily routine. When no one's watching, when you're just trying to get through a normal day without friction. And that's exactly where this update quietly reveals what Meta is really building. And who it's actually for. If you're over 30, you already know this pattern. You've lived through enough tech cycles to recognize when an update is about progress and when it's about direction. Version 21.0 for Meta glasses isn't flashy in the traditional sense. It doesn't scream revolution. Instead, it does something more interesting. It exposes how far Meta has moved away from cool gadget territory and how close it's getting to something that wants to be infrastructure in your life. And infrastructure doesn't need to impress you. It needs to work reliably, quietly, consistently. Now, before we even get into features, there's something important to acknowledge. Not everything shows up for everyone. That alone tells you a lot. This update behaves differently depending on which glasses you own, where you're located, which app version you're on, and sometimes for reasons that aren't explained at all. And if you've ever opened the Meta AI app expecting to see a new toggle only to find nothing, you already understand the subtle frustration this creates. Not anger, just doubt. The kind that makes you wonder whether you're early or simply not prioritized. Let's start with the idea of finding your glasses. Because on the surface it sounds simple, almost boring. But in reality, it taps into something deeply practical. Find Device doesn't try to be an AirTag. It doesn't track movement in real time. It doesn't constantly ping satellites. What it does instead is remember. It remembers the last place your phone was connected to your glasses. And if you ever place them down in a cafe, at home, in a car, or during a rushed moment you don't fully recall, you already know how valuable that memory can be. What's fascinating isn't the feature itself, it's the restraint. Meta could have made this louder, more visual, more aggressive. Instead, it's passive. It waits until you need it. And that alone signals a shift in philosophy. These glasses aren't trying to demand attention every minute. They're trying to reduce low-level stress, the kind that creeps in when you misplace something you use every day. For users in their 30s and beyond, that matters more than most specs ever will. But here's where reality steps in. For some users, the option simply isn't there. You scroll, you check privacy and security, you look again, and it's missing. That absence creates a strange experience, not disappointment but uncertainty, because you know it exists. You've seen it working for others, and now you're stuck wondering whether this is a rollout delay, a regional limitation, or something deeper about how Meta segments its users. And this pattern repeats. Hyperlapse, for example, sounds fun. Hands-free time compression. Up to 30 minutes of capture condensed into a smooth, shareable clip. On paper, it's a creator's toy. In reality, it's something else entirely. It's a test of how long Meta is willing to let you record without interruption, and how much they trust the hardware to hold up during passive use. 30 minutes may not sound like much, but in wearable terms, it's a statement. It says, we expect you to keep these on while you move, while you live, while you forget they're there. And when it works, it's genuinely impressive. A few minutes of walking turns into a brief, fluid visual story, not cinematic, not dramatic, just clean. And that's important, because hyperlapse isn't about showing off. It's about compressing experience without distorting it. For biking, commuting, casual movement, it feels aligned with how adults actually use tech. Capture, then move on. Slow motion takes a different approach. It's limited, 1 minute max. Supported devices only, and yet even here, reality bends the rules. Some users on older generations find it working anyway. Others don't, and this inconsistency, while frustrating, also reveals something interesting. Meta is experimenting in the wild. Features aren't locked behind rigid walls anymore. They're being tested on real users in real conditions, with feedback looping back into development. The experience itself is straightforward. You say the command. You capture a moment. Playback reveals details you wouldn't normally notice. It's not about spectacle. It's about presence. About slowing down just enough to notice motion, texture, timing. For an older audience, that resonates. Because at this stage of life, tech that helps you notice, rather than distract, carries more value. Now let's talk about stabilization, because this is where expectations and reality really diverge. Adjustable stabilization sounds like control, manual tuning, customization, but when you open the app and the option simply isn't there, the promise feels hollow. And again, this isn't about a missing checkbox. It's about trust. When features are announced universally but delivered selectively without explanation, users start to question not the tech but the communication. Still, the idea itself points towards something meaningful. Meta understands that movement is unpredictable, that not everyone wants the same level of correction, that sometimes natural motion feels better than hyper-smooth perfection. The ability to choose or let the system decide acknowledges user maturity. It assumes you know what you want from your footage. Even if the execution isn't fully there yet, the intent matters. Sharing clips directly to social platforms feels like a logical evolution. But here again, friction creeps in. Voice commands don't always trigger action. Permissions feel unclear. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. And when it fails, you're reminded that these glasses still rely heavily on an ecosystem that's evolving in real time. The promise of seamless sharing is real, but the reliability hasn't fully caught up. And for someone over 30, reliability matters more than novelty. You don't want to troubleshoot. You don't want to wonder whether it's user error or system limitation. You want things to either work or clearly tell you why they don't. This update, intentionally or not, highlights where Meta still needs to grow. Now, athlete-focused features like performance tracking and workout intelligence signal a clear expansion into niche territory. This isn't for everyone, and Meta knows that. By pairing with Garmin, Strava, Apple Health, Meta isn't trying to own fitness. They're trying to integrate with it, and that's a smart move. Adults already have systems they trust. Forcing replacement would fail. Supporting enhancement might succeed. Voice-created workouts, auto-captured milestones, stats layered over footage. This isn't about casual users. It's about people who care about progress, about data, about context. And while not all devices support it yet, the direction is unmistakable. Meta wants these glasses to move beyond passive capture into active participation in your routines. Music integration through context-aware AI is subtle but telling. Asking the glasses to play music based on what you're seeing isn't about novelty, it's about environmental awareness. It's about letting tech respond to your surroundings instead of pulling you away from them. When it works, it feels intuitive. When it doesn't, you immediately notice the gap. And that sensitivity, that awareness of alignment, is something younger users might overlook, but older users feel immediately. Language expansion and voice shortcuts further reinforce this pattern. Meta isn't chasing trends. They're filling gaps. They're broadening access. They're reducing friction. And while not every feature lands perfectly, the cumulative effect is clear. This update isn't designed to wow you in a demo. It's designed to settle into your life slowly, and that's the key insight here. Version 21.0 isn't about one feature. It's about trajectory. It's about Meta quietly testing what kind of presence these glasses should have in your day, how often they should speak, how much they should interrupt, how visible they should be when nothing is happening. By the end of this update, the biggest question isn't whether everything works flawlessly. It's whether the direction feels right. And for many users over 30, that answer won't come immediately. It'll emerge after days, after habits form, after you notice whether you reach for the glasses or leave them on the table. The real shift happens after the first few days, when the excitement wears off and something quieter takes its place. You stop actively testing the glasses. You stop saying commands just to see if they work. You stop scrolling through settings, hoping a missing toggle magically appears. Instead, the glasses either become part of your routine, or they don't. And that's where version 21.0 starts revealing its true personality, not as an update, but as a behavioral experiment. If you're in your 30s or older, you've already learned that good technology disappears when it's doing its job right. You don't want to feel clever for using it. You don't want to adapt your habits around it. You want it to adapt to you. And this update seems very aware of that expectation. Even when it doesn't fully meet it yet, one of the most telling changes isn't even a feature. It's the way interaction feels over time. Earlier versions of Meta glasses encouraged engagement. You talked to them more. You triggered actions just because you could. With 21.0, something subtle shifts. The glasses feel more selective, less eager to interrupt. Almost like Meta is testing how much silence users can tolerate or prefer. And that's a big deal. Silence is uncomfortable for younger platforms. Silence doesn't generate engagement metrics. Silence doesn't look impressive in marketing. Videos. But silence is exactly what a lot of long-term users want. The ability to glance, capture, check, and move on without being pulled into a loop of prompts and confirmations. This becomes especially clear when you look at how voice interaction behaves now. Commands still work, but there's less theatrical feedback, fewer unnecessary confirmations. When something succeeds, it often does so quietly. When it fails, it becomes more noticeable, and that contrast matters. Because success fades into the background, while friction stands out sharply, that's where frustration creeps in for some users. Not loud frustration. Not anger. More like a quiet erosion of confidence. When a feature like Find Device exists, but doesn't show up for you, you don't get mad. You just stop expecting consistency. And when expectations drop, engagement follows. Use the glasses a little less. You rely on them a little less. Not intentionally, subconsciously. Yet, at the same time, there are moments where the glasses feel genuinely aligned with adult life. Hyperlapse, for instance, isn't something most people over 30 will use daily. But when they do, it's for a reason. A walk they want to remember. A drive they want to compress. A routine they want to document without staring at a phone. And the fact that this can happen hands-free, without breaking flow, makes it feel mature, not gimmicky. The same goes for slow motion. It's not about dramatic shots. It's about capturing nuance, the spin of an object, the movement of water, a gesture you want to understand better. When the glasses capture that without forcing you into a setup mindset, it feels like technology serving curiosity, not performance. But again, the inconsistency matters. When features appear on unsupported devices or fail to appear where they're promised, users start forming theories. Is Meta prioritizing newer hardware? Is this A/B testing? Is it regional? Is it gradual rollout? And the problem isn't any single answer. It's the lack of clarity. Adults don't need perfection. They need transparency. This is also where adjustable stabilization becomes symbolic. On paper, it represents control. In practice, for many users, it represents absence. And absence in a UI is one of the most frustrating things because it denies you closure. You can't decide not to use a feature you don't have access to. You can only wonder. Yet, even with these gaps, there's a clear evolution in how Meta treats movement. The glasses are less rigid now, less focused on perfect output. There's an acceptance that life isn't smooth, and footage doesn't always need to be. That philosophy aligns well with people who've outgrown the need for everything to look cinematic. Sharing content directly from the glasses highlights another tension: convenience versus control. The idea of saying a sentence and watching a clip appear on your Instagram story is powerful. But when it doesn't work reliably, you're reminded that automation only feels good when it's dependable. Otherwise, manual action becomes preferable. Again, and that's a pattern worth paying attention to. When automation fails, users revert to habits they trust. Phone out, app open, manual upload. And every time that happens, the glasses lose a little ground. Not permanently, but meaningfully. Now, when we step into the fitness-related features, something interesting happens. Meta stops trying to appeal to everyone and starts speaking directly to a specific mindset. People who track progress. People who set goals. People who care about improvement over time. That audience overlaps heavily with users in their 30s and 40s. Pairing with Garmin isn't accidental. Garmin users value reliability. They value data accuracy. They value long-term consistency. By integrating voice-created workouts and performance insights, Meta isn't trying to replace existing systems. It's trying to reduce friction between them. And that's where voice shortcuts become important. Removing the need to say, "Hey." Meta repeatedly may sound trivial, but over weeks and months, it changes how natural interaction feels. It reduces performative behavior. You're not announcing intent. You're executing it. That shift matters because adults don't want to narrate their actions. They want tools that respond quietly and quickly. And voice shortcuts, when they work as intended, align perfectly with that desire. Music integration follows a similar pattern. Context-based playback isn't about discovery, it's about mood alignment. Letting the environment influence sound instead of defaulting to algorithms. It's subtle, it's situational, and when it works, it feels respectful of attention, rather than demanding it. Language expansion may not affect everyone directly, but it reveals Meta's broader goal, normalizing voice as primary input across cultures. That tells you these glasses aren't designed for niche adoption. They're designed for global, everyday use. And that kind of ambition only works if the experience feels natural, not forced. By this point, something becomes clear. Version 21.0 isn't trying to impress new buyers. It's trying to understand existing ones. It's collecting behavioral data. It's watching where people hesitate, where they disengage, where they rely on features, and where they ignore them entirely. For users over 30, this update may feel uneven. Some days it feels like progress. Other days it feels unfinished. But beneath that inconsistency is a clear question being asked. How present should technology be in your life? The glasses no longer feel like they're begging to be used. They're waiting, and whether you reach for them or not becomes the most honest metric of success. And that brings us to the most revealing part of the experience. Not what you use, but what you stop using. Notifications you mute. Commands you forget. Features you don't bother checking anymore. Over time, these absences form a pattern. And that pattern tells Meta more than any survey ever could. This is where the update truly lives. Not in menus or changelogs, but in habits. And once habits form, they're hard to change, which is why the next layer of this story isn't about features at all. It's about trust, about comfort, about whether these glasses feel like something you want on your face when life isn't exciting, when nothing special is happening. When you're just being human, that's where the real test begins. Somewhere between the first week and the second, another shift happens, one that most people don't consciously notice at first. You stop thinking of the glasses as a product with updates and start experiencing them as a presence. Not in a dramatic way. More like how you notice a watch on your wrist only when it's uncomfortable, or when it saves you time. This is where version 21.0 quietly exposes something important about Meta's approach. The glasses don't demand loyalty. They don't punish you for ignoring them. If you forget to wear them for a day, nothing bad happens. No guilt, no sense of missing out. And for an audience over 30, that's actually refreshing, but also revealing. Because when technology doesn't punish you, it has to earn you back. And earning attention at this stage of life is hard. You've already lived through devices that promised more than they delivered. You've already seen game-changing turn into collecting dust in a drawer. So now, the question isn't what's new, it's what sticks. One of the first sticking points becomes reliability. Not in a technical sense, but in an emotional one. Do you trust the glasses to behave the same way every time you put them on? Do you trust that today's experience won't feel wildly different tomorrow? This is where some users start to feel friction, even if everything technically works. When features roll out inconsistently, trust gets strained. Not broken, strained. You find yourself hesitating before using voice commands. You wonder if something will respond, or if you'll have to repeat yourself. And that hesitation matters, because hesitation is the enemy of habit. Adults don't want to feel like beta testers. They want to feel like owners. At the same time. When things do work, they work in a way that respects momentum. You don't lose your place in the world when you interact with the glasses. That's still one of their biggest strengths. You're not looking down. You're not isolating yourself. You stay upright, alert, present. That's the promise. Meta gets right more often than not. This becomes particularly noticeable in transitional moments. Walking from one place to another, waiting in line, pausing between tasks. Those moments used to default to phone usage. Now sometimes they don't. And that change isn't dramatic, but it's meaningful. Yet even here, there's nuance. Because sometimes the glasses encourage interaction when none is needed. A subtle audio cue, a prompt, a suggestion. And while each one is harmless on its own, over time, they accumulate into a sense of low-level engagement. Not distraction-engagement. For someone in their 30s or 40s, that can feel exhausting in a way that's hard to explain. You're not overwhelmed, you're just on. And being on all the time is something a lot of people are actively trying to reduce. That's why silence becomes a defining feature. Even though it's never listed in changelogs, when the glasses stay quiet, they feel supportive. When they speak up unnecessarily, they feel intrusive. Version 21.0 seems to be experimenting with this balance, sometimes successfully, sometimes awkwardly. Then there's the issue of error recovery, a deeply underrated part of user experience. When something doesn't work, how gracefully does the system let you move on? With earlier versions, errors often required re-engagement. Repeat the command. Reset the flow. Say the wake phrase again. With 21.0, there's an attempt to reduce this friction. But when it fails, the failure feels heavier because expectations have shifted. You're no longer impressed by possibility. You're evaluating reliability. This becomes especially clear with social sharing. The idea of instant sharing is appealing. But the reality of unpredictable execution makes many users revert to manual methods. And when that happens, a silent judgment forms. I'll just do this myself. That sentence, once internalized, is dangerous for any wearable. Fitness features add another layer to this story. They introduce structure, goals, measurement. And for many users over 30, structure is comforting. It signals purpose. Integration with established platforms like Garmin reinforces that feeling. It tells users, we're not replacing your system. We're supporting it. That messaging matters. It respects investment. It acknowledges that people have already built routines, identities, and progress around their existing tools. The glasses aren't trying to become the center. They're trying to become connective tissue. Voice-created workouts, when they work, feel empowering. You're not navigating menus. You're expressing intent, and intent is powerful. Especially for adults who value efficiency over novelty. Voice shortcuts push this further. They reduce ceremony. They remove the need to perform interaction. You're not talking to the device, you're instructing it. That subtle shift in language changes the relationship, but again, consistency is key. If shortcuts work sometimes and not others, users adapt defensively. They stop relying on them. They fall back to safer patterns. And every fallback weakens adoption. Music features, particularly environment-based playback, flirt with something deeper, emotional intelligence. Not artificial intelligence, but situational sensitivity. When music aligns naturally with context, it feels thoughtful. When it misfires, it feels generic. And for an older audience, generic is a red flag. It signals lack of understanding. Language expansion in Europe reveals another truth. Meta is building for scale, not perfection. That's a strategic choice. But scale introduces unevenness. And unevenness is more noticeable to experienced users who have learned to spot shortcuts. By now, after weeks of use, the glasses stop feeling like they're evolving and start feeling like they've settled into a personality. And that personality isn't flashy. It's observant, experimental, slightly reserved, but it's also cautious, maybe too cautious at times. Features appear, disappear, half work, or arrive late. And while Meta likely sees this as responsible rollout, users experience it as unpredictability. Unpredictability doesn't break trust instantly. It erodes it slowly. And yet, despite all of this, the glasses remain compelling. Because they still solve a problem nothing else does quite as elegantly. They let you stay upright in the world while still accessing information. That core promise hasn't been broken. What version 21.0 does is test whether that promise is enough. On its own, without novelty, without hype, without constant reminders, and that's where life experience matters. Younger users chase stimulation. Older users chase flow. Flow is when tools disappear and outcomes remain. At this point, users stop asking, what can the glasses do? And start asking something much quieter. Do these glasses respect me? Respect shows up in subtle ways. In not interrupting, in not demanding attention, in allowing absence, in forgiving inconsistency without punishing curiosity. The glasses are closer to that ideal than they used to be. But they're not there yet. And the final judgment doesn't come from feature lists or update notes. It comes from mornings. From whether you reach for them without thinking. From whether you put them on for mundane tasks, from whether they feel like effort or relief. That's the real test. And that test doesn't happen in the first week. It happens after the novelty fades. After you've forgotten what version you're on. After the glasses have stopped being new, which brings us to the last layer of this experience. The long-term emotional contract between you and the device. Not what it promises, but what it asks of you in return. And once you see that clearly, it changes how you define the future of smart glasses entirely. Eventually, you reach a point where the glasses stop trying to impress you, and you stop trying to evaluate them. This phase doesn't arrive with an update notification or a changelog. It arrives quietly, almost invisibly, during ordinary moments that aren't worth filming. It shows up while you're standing in a queue, walking to your car, or sitting in silence before a meeting starts. And for an audience over 30, this phase matters more than anything else, because it's the phase where novelty dies and usefulness either survives or disappears. This is where the relationship settles. Earlier, every interaction felt intentional. You were testing features, checking responsiveness, noticing delays, measuring comfort, asking yourself whether this thing justified its presence in your life. But now you don't think like that anymore. The updates blur together. You don't. Remember what arrived in version 20, 21, or whatever came after. You only remember what stayed. And what stayed isn't a feature, a command, or a spec. It's a feeling. A quiet understanding of whether the glasses fit naturally into your daily rhythm, or whether your life kept having to bend around them. That distinction becomes impossible to ignore. Once you've lived enough years with technology, you've seen gadgets that demanded rituals, devices that required careful handling, ecosystems that punished you for forgetting one small step. You've also seen tools that simply worked until they didn't, and when they stopped working, life carried on. Just fine. These glasses fall into the second category, and that alone already says a lot. One morning you leave the house without them. Not intentionally. There's no dramatic decision behind it. Habit just misfires. You grab your keys, your wallet, your phone, the essentials, and walk out the door. Nothing breaks. No alarms go off. No notification follows you down the stairs. And that's when it hits you. The glasses never trained you to depend on them. They didn't replace your phone. They didn't replace your awareness. They didn't insert themselves as a gatekeeper between you and the world. That realization is subtle, but it's powerful. Most modern technology is designed to anchor itself deeply into your routine. It wants absence to feel painful. It wants you to notice when it's gone. It wants dependency. These glasses don't chase that feeling. And even if it was never explicitly advertised, that restraint feels intentional. It feels like a decision rather than a limitation. Later that same day, when you do put them on again, the difference registers immediately, not because something new appears, but because something disappears. Small frictions you had learned to tolerate quietly vanish. You reach for your phone less often. You move between tasks without breaking flow as frequently. You don't pause conversations to check something trivial. You don't interrupt your own thoughts as much. The glasses don't change your behavior aggressively. They don't force new habits. They just tilt existing ones gently. And gentle matters when you've lived long enough to know how exhausting aggressive technology can be. At this stage, comfort stops being about weight, pressure points, or materials. Those things fade from awareness quickly. Comfort becomes mental. It becomes about cognitive load, about predictability, about trust. Physically, the glasses feel like glasses. That's expected. Mentally, they feel consistent, and predictability is one of the most underrated qualities. In any tool meant for adults, you know how they'll respond when you speak. You know when they'll stay quiet. You know when they'll interrupt and when they won't. Even when they don't work perfectly, you understand their limits. And limits, when clearly communicated, are comforting. They reduce uncertainty. They remove the anxiety of guessing how a device might behave in any given moment. This is also the point where you start noticing what the glasses don't do, and appreciating them for it. They don't flood your field of view with constant visual overlays. They don't push notifications just because something happened somewhere. They don't demand interaction when none is needed. They leave space. Space for boredom. Space for reflection. Space for silence. Silence quietly becomes the most underrated feature. In social situations, this restraint pays off immediately. You Don't feel like you're performing technology. People don't react differently when they talk to you. Eye contact stays natural. Pauses stay human. You're not narrating your life to a device. You're not half present. You're there, with a quiet assistant nearby. Not a spotlight dot for many users over 30. This is the moment real trust forms. Not trust in raw performance or specs, but trust in intention. You stop worrying that the glasses are trying to pull you somewhere else, into a platform, into a habit loop, into a monetization funnel. They don't feel hungry for your attention. They feel patient. And optional technology is the only kind that survives long-term in adult life. Battery behavior reinforces this feeling more than you might expect. Early on, you probably checked percentages. You wondered how long they'd last. You worried about charging cycles. Now, you've learned the rhythm. You know roughly when to charge. You know when not to care. The device fits around your day instead of structuring it. You don't plan life around battery anymore. And that alone removes a surprising amount of friction. That familiarity eliminates anxiety. And anxiety is the fastest way to abandon a wearable dot. By this point, the glasses also reveal their philosophy. Clearly, they aren't trying to redefine reality. They're not layering the world with constant data. They're not chasing spectacle or immersion for the sake of it. They're trying to reduce interruption, to smooth transitions, to let you do what you were already doing with fewer breaks. That philosophy won't excite everyone, and that's fine. Adults tend to appreciate honesty and limitations. If you want nonstop visual engagement, these glasses won't give you that experience. If you want your reality augmented at all times, this approach may feel restrained. But if you want technology to step back unless called upon, this design makes sense in a way that's difficult to explain until you live with it. This is where the idea of the future starts to feel grounded. The future isn't louder. It isn't faster. It isn't always on by default. The future, for many people, is calmer, more selective, more respectful of attention. It's technology that understands that attention is finite and valuable, and that's the future these glasses quietly point toward. The most telling metric isn't screen time or usage hours. It isn't feature adoption or retention charts. It's whether you stop thinking about ownership at all. When something becomes part of your environment instead of an object of focus, it has succeeded. You don't ask whether it's worth it anymore. You don't justify it. It just exists, and that existence feels appropriate. By the end of this journey, it no longer feels like you tested a device. It feels like you observed a design philosophy unfold slowly over time. A philosophy built around restraint, optionality, and respect for the user's mental space. Those values don't trend well on spec sheets, but they age exceptionally well in real life. So when people ask whether these glasses are worth it, the answer resists simplicity. It depends on where you are in life. It depends on what you want technology to do for you now. Do you want to be guided constantly or supported quietly? Do you want to see more or interrupt less? Do you want tools that demand your attention or tools that protect it? Once you answer those questions honestly, the device almost chooses itself. That's the unexpected part, not the update, not the feature list, not the marketing promises, but the clarity it forces, not about smart glasses, but about your own relationship with technology. And for an audience that has already lived through multiple tech cycles, chased hype, abandoned devices, upgraded phones year after year, that clarity might be the most valuable feature of all. This is where the story actually ends. Not with excitement, not with hype, not with a countdown to the next version, but with alignment between the tool and the life it's meant to live in. And sometimes that's exactly what real progress looks like.